Hey guys, it's Matt. This presentation is a summary of the biggest takeaways from part one. So if somebody puts 25 years into, quote, conspiracy research, in my opinion, if they don't get to these simple takeaways, they've wasted their time. Of course, 99% plus will never get out of the bog. They'll never get to these simple conclusions. Therefore, 99% plus, in my opinion, will have wasted their time and will continue to waste their time up until the day they die. Part one is where this reality wants you. Part two is the self-work, the reason for actually being alive, the reason for this reality in existence, the things most people never get to. But this is a summary of part one. I look around YouTube and different places, and the nonsense never ends. Now, maybe I'll get in a little bit better mood later. It's a little bit hard-hitting up front. The nonsense that people spend their time on, it amazes me. Nobody learns their lesson. It took me a long time. It took me about 10 years, but I learned my lesson. What's the definition of insanity? The major takeaways coming are all needed to exit or step out of the bog. As I do this, I am flashing every 10 or 20 seconds. I took a bunch of screenshots, the conspiracy charts, everything QAnon was involved in. What type of alien's this? All the stuff. It's ridiculous at this point for us to not step out of the bog. If you are researching these topics, you're falling for the reality trick. It's a waste of... Okay, let's get to the summary conclusions. Number one, this world isn't, put it the way that you prefer. This world is not very real, or this world is not real at all. As I flash all these different conspiracy topics, you know what I'm going to say if you've been here for longer than a year. This is ridiculous. No real world could pull this off. Look at all the topics. No real world could fuel this investigation in so many different segments. It's thousands of different things as I flash different topics. This is ridiculous. No real world could do it. If there are so many thousands or tens of thousands of topics or things to research or things to jump into, like the guy I met in Florida who did 10 to 15 years of research on inner Earth or a whole world inside our world. He was into Dyson spheres and all that stuff. He put so much effort and time into it. This person has passed, but that's one of 10,000 conspiracies. If each conspiracy is supported, and we've talked about, when you go out to the library, you don't come home and say, I didn't find anything, Mom, what's for dinner? You always find things to bring you in closer, to suck you down the rabbit hole even further. Now, the conclusion is that means that it's not creating it on its own, which means the consciousness interested in the topic is in some way involved or necessary for the topic to exist. This is another interpretation of the old stuffed Lenin or Humpty Dumpty, artificially carried through time, one of the most famous ones and most important. If a tree falls in the woods and there is nobody there, no consciousness to observe it, does it make a sound? Okay. If there's no one interested in Tartaria, not does Tartaria exist, that's not the way I really want to put it here. Does the do the breadcrumbs exist? Do the maps exist? See where I'm going? If there's nobody interested in researching aliens or alien abduction or what's a gray or what's a blue avian and all this horse shit, if there's nobody interested, not a great way of putting it, but you see what I mean, then do the aliens exist? Not really, but does the evidence and the breadcrumbs exist if there's no consciousness interested? Of course, here we go again, the Kabbalion, all is mind. Mind became, before the Big Bang, Stephen Hawking, Mr. Voicebox. In the beginning, there were... Stop with your voice box. Consciousness comes first. Therefore, the conspiracy topics don't exist on their own. Let's get out of the bog, people. Let's not be stupid for another 10 years. Sorry, Matt, calm down. This is a summary. Number one, the world is not real. No real world could produce tens of thousands of things to research that are called conspiracy, that are seen by some people, and of course shunned and not seen by others. Impossible. Even the way it creates camps amongst those who can see and those who can't, impossible. Number two, the conspiracy topics wouldn't exist on their own without certain consciousness being interested in those topics. This is obvious at this point. If the tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? You know what that's saying in this regard? If there's no real consciousness here, or maybe it's all NPCs, no real people, no consciousness of a certain type, do these topics exist? No, they don't exist. The consciousness is needed And you can see as the conspiracies expand over the decades, the consciousness, whatever this mechanism here that uses consciousness, it's used to expand the breadcrumbs, create more topics. This is not Nilk. So looping back to the stuff Lenin mentioned, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to witness it, doesn't make a sound. In this regard, it does not make a sound. In this regard, the way I'm thinking that stuff Lenin or Humpty Dumpty wants to be applied to this aspect of reality, it does not make a sound, is what the old stuffed Lenin is telling me without the consciousness, because these conspiracy topics wouldn't exist on their own without anybody being, at least one person being real, being interested in them. It seems the way the not Nilk mechanism works, the more people it can get interested, the more thousands of people say, this Tartaria thing's quite interesting. I'm going to put my consciousness on it. Then it can grow like an egregore. It can expand itself. It can live and breathe whatever is being created, but it cannot exist on its own. Think of YouTube channels you watch or BitChute channels you watch, and maybe their area of research is more specific in terms of what they investigate. And year after year goes by, and there's more and more examples, more and more amazing things that relate to their topic of choice. Have any of these channels come forth after 3 years or 5 years or 8 years or 10 years and made a presentation saying, I'm changing up the way I see the world because this is ridiculous? The amount of examples that reality keeps feeding us or me here to show this, to reinforce this notion, to create more conspiracy. It keeps coming. It keeps coming. And there's more and more. Have any other channels reached this conclusion? I apologize if they have, because I don't really watch anything anymore. Maybe it's 100 monkeys. Matt, you ain't the only one saying this. You ain't special, sir. Maybe everyone's saying, listen, the amount of breadcrumbs reality showing for our specific topic has now gotten to ludicrous speed, and it's gone plaid. It's ridiculous. Therefore, the way we see the world has to change. We might continue to do this sort of research, and that's, our hobby or our topic, but under the general guise and the reminder of this world can't be very real. There's no way this type of evidence keeps coming in over and over again. It's what I alluded to even in the last video with some of the examples where how many a month does somebody send me some old news clipping that shows the towers and the plane. Remember from yesterday? It keeps coming. It keeps coming. Oh, here's the towers, and this news article inserted a plane in a certain place, and it's never ending. And the evidence keeps coming, or it's like the residuals keep coming. And so if your area of interest is blank, how much can this reality possibly show you? For example, how much impossible architecture can there be? How many Tartaria maps are going to pop up? How much evidence that aliens were here or there? Or let's say my area of interest was Antarctica. Now, use your inner knowing, inner tuning fork. If I made a channel and I said to you right now, this general noticing reality and not Nilk, and it's no fun. Let's just dive into a conspiracy. I'm going to have a channel that's just on the secrets and the mystery of Antarctica. Now, do you think that channel could go on for a few weeks? Do you think there'd be anything I would find? What does your inner knowing say? Your inner tuning fork? Of course. Well, first it would start with Admiral Byrd, then the Nazis, and it would be endless. Their channel, I guarantee I could do a 3-year, 4-year channel just on the mysteries surrounding Antarctica. No real world could do that, folks. Consciousness and me being interested in the topic, and then perhaps me getting you interested in the topic, and more consciousness, and it's like that shampoo commercial from 1978, and so on, and then they told 2 friends, what the hell was that from? And so where does shit come from in my mind? And so on, and they told 2 friends, and so on, and so on, and so on. And that's how it spreads. That's how it lives. It's like a living thing, an egregore or something. It spreads. It needs you. Jack Nicholson, you need me on that wall. You want me on that wall. Who's going to protect America? You, Schoenstein? The egregores that represent or live through the conspiracy need you on that wall, need your interest and attention. It dies without that. Don't we know that by now? Another recap. Number 1, the amount of conspiracy topics that can be researched that then feed more and more and more, and so on and so on and so on, is so large, there's no real world that could do that. That's number 1. Number 2 is these topics cannot exist on their own if a tree falls in the woods. They need real consciousness. And one of the Not Nilk's tricks is to get real consciousness interested in more and more conspiracy. It basically brings the conspiracy to life. All right, that's basically 1 and 2. This, in a way, explains mistakes on purpose. Mistakes on purpose is simply baiting a hook. Most mistakes have been intentional. I started saying that, 2014, 2015. Started saying, what is going on here? They wouldn't make this mistake. It's so ridiculous. It has to be intentional, so we get sucked in. Now we kind of understand why it wanted us sucked in. Didn't have to present the day after a ribby Robbie. It didn't have to do that. If anything, there's a 7-minute delay. No, of course it didn't need to put a buffoon up. They could have said, reshoot inflated tires. They didn't need to do. We have thousands of mistakes, quote mistakes, that we know now are on purpose. They didn't have to have endless incidents on the ISS. But I'm talking about the new movie coming out, the ISS, where somebody grabs for an object that's not really there, but then it's shown on the blue screen, and, oh, we caught them, aren't we sleuths? Oh, like they couldn't get first graders to proof their work. Oh, yeah. Well, what we're talking about now explains what it was for. It needs a certain type of consciousness focused on it. We know deep down we've been the biggest tool, and we have been used, our community, more than any other group to further its aims. We know we've been used. Maybe we can change things. I hope we can. But up until this point, our group, or the consciousness we represent, or whatever type of entity we are we different from our best friends and our Aunt Ginnies? We don't know exactly. But it needs us. We know that now. And this relates to another major premise here in understanding the summary of part 1, why it needs to operate behind a trick. It needs to operate behind a trick. It relates to those concentric rings diagram about the outer ring of reality representing the Not Nilk or the screen, and reality becoming, quote, kind of more real as you work the rings in towards your heart center or personal reality bubble. The Not Nilk it needs to operate behind a trick. So we've put it this way in the past. It floats blurry images at the periphery. It floats vague notions of what it wants. It cannot solidify that stuff into reality on its own. It needs real consciousness from their heart-based reality bubbles to go engage with it, to reach out, to go shake hands with it. So for however it wants to influence society and culture and move the collective consciousness into a new place, that new place is almost always a degenerative, if that's even the right word, or it's a bastardization and it's an impurity and it's a lower state. That's always where it wants to go. It uses little things and aspects in society and culture to do that to the collective conscious of real people, but each little thing it can't do on its own. It's vague images, blurry images, and vague notions. Real people are the emulsifier, if that's the right word, or the water if it's a mortar or cement being mixed up. It does not harden without that final component, the water in cement mixing, or whatever it may be. You, or real consciousness, is the water, or whatever emulsifier, if that's the right word, that hardens it up and brings it into reality, perhaps permanently. It cannot do what it wants on its own. We know that, but yet it took us decades, to realize how important or critical we are to its aims, particularly our truth research community, doing exactly what it wants and still falling for it for the most part. Here's an inner knowing, inner tuning fork exercise we'll do right now. Everybody will have their own different example, but I guarantee it'll work the same way every time. Pick a conspiracy topic right now. Something you may have been personally interested in. You spent 2 years watching videos on, or something or just another topic, just whatever. Pick a topic you know a little bit about in our truth research community. All right, you got it? Got the topic? Now, do you think, ask your inner knowing right now, tell it to wake up 100%, inner tuning fork. Does the Not Nilk, according to your inner knowing, does it like the fact that you're pursuing that topic? Or is it like scared that you're pursuing that topic? Does it want you not spending an hour on it, or does it want you spending 100 more hours on it, whatever your topic may be? The mystery of Antarctica, mud flood, Tartaria, this type of alley, whatever it may be, even mall events, school events. Does it want you spending more time on it, or is it scared that you're investigating it? Do I really have to pause? I mean, it's screaming at you. Your inner knowing, I guarantee, is screaming at you. The not nilk is in love with the fact, your inner knowing is probably saying that, quote, I've spent time on this topic, and it would love it if I spent even more time. Well, what does that tell you? It's all you need to know. It tells you that the topic itself is, for lack of better words, of the not nilk, or you could say of the reality trick. It's pretty simple. If it wasn't pursuing that topic led to real truth, then the not nilk, or whatever dark is here, whatever minion group, or whatever, whoever you blame here, wouldn't want you spending time on that topic. But deep down, it does want you spending time on that topic. That means that topic is part of the trick itself. It's real simple to me, but maybe I'm not sure. Maybe like 90% of you are going, "That's just ridiculous, Matt. I don't know. You've finally lost it." It's crystal clear to me. Well, I'll look to your comments. If I've lost it, let me know. As I was recording the last segment, the word mechanism kept popping into my mind. I sat here for a few minutes and thought about it. The word mechanism needs to be inserted into whatever definition we have for not nilk. Now, if anybody's new, the point, without straying and doing a whole separate video series, the bad guys that the reality wants us to point at in the police lineup, that's not the final bad guy. It's not the secret society. It's not the Rothschilds. It's not the Anunnaki. If it can be pointed at, or this reality is kind of saying, look at this bad guy here, well, they might be a bad actor, not letting them off the hook, but it's bigger than that. It's not that reality wants you to see it at that lower level. Now, it's a outer layer of the screen. We've talked about the outer ring of reality, but what does that mean, right? Well, the ring that's farther out from your heart-based center, but the word mechanism. It's the trick here to fool real people in this game, or whatever we're involved in here, whether you think we agreed to come here, we're not, or we're in a trap, or we're not. It's a mechanism. It's a dark mechanism that uses 1,000 different things at its disposal to play a trick. We have to use or keep the word mechanism now inside the description of a very vague term, not nilk or asshole dark. The point of even coming up with not nilk or asshole dark in the first place was to get people away from that police lineup. If you're pointing at a bad guy, saying, okay, this culprit right here, see that number 3 there in the police lineup, whatever group it may be, or this group, or whatever, then you're being fooled by the reality itself. It's in love when you take it down to that level, try to point at a bad guy. It loves that because the truth researcher that investigates that the world is something not quite right is usually a certain type of person, maybe the highest evolution of spiritual entity here. I mean, we don't know, but it's definitely the focus, a very big focus of the dark here, the SL dark, or the not nilk. Our group, Neo was used, as I've said many times, in the Matrix to do the bidding of the architect and the oracle. Neo was used to implant the code. We have been the target of not nilk in terms of what it wants us talking about and what it wants us pursuing, and in terms of even creating camps, divide and conquer camps where family groups break up and friends don't talk to each other. We have been its primary target. And somebody may say, but Matt, it's not because we're more important. The masses just do whatever it says the first time it asks. And okay, maybe it has to work a little harder on us. But I think it's more than that. I think we are like that emulsifier, that water to harden the cement. I believe our group is that. So that brings us to the final component. I think most of the old guard would understand exactly what I'm saying and agree with a lot of what I'm saying based on where we've come up to this point. But if you're not sure, or if you're new, this last item does give it all away. It proves, I think, everything I said before this moment. And it's the last key piece that, as you've heard me say, gives reality away. So how do I know basically this is how it works? That it needs to operate behind a trick. It wouldn't exist on its own. Or these topics wouldn't exist. It needs you to bring the notion or the blurry image into reality. How do I know all this? Because of how hard it works. Okay? It's because of how hard it works. Any example, these bad examples, go watch an athlete train for 8 to 10 weeks before the 200 or 400 meter races for the Olympics. Now, you might not know anything about Olympic running. Say you just landed here from an alien planet. You came down in a spaceship. Maybe Jared Kushner gave you a ride, and you didn't know anything about it. But you observed, the person that would eventually win the gold medal for the 400 meter. Okay, that's once around the track. You'd see this person spending 10 hours a day, say 10 weeks before the Olympics, 10 hours a day, 8 to 10 hours a day, focused on that one event. The way they eat, there'd be a few hours of stretching. There'd be massage or muscle massage. There'd be the training in the morning, the training in the afternoon. There'd be maybe some weightlifting. You might not know anything, but you would say, this is necessary. Let's say you could see the future. You knew that person was going to win the gold. You'd say, what they're doing here is obviously necessary for that result. If somebody comes along just holding 4 pizzas and shoving slice after slice in their mouth, you might not know a thing about track and field and say, that person wouldn't succeed. If you compared his actions, behavior, any bad behavior, just doing a bottle of vodka every night, to the way the person that you knew would win the gold medal, what they were doing in the 8 or 10 hours a day leading up to the Olympics. Okay, I don't know if the example works or not. I'm not going to re-record. You generally know what I'm saying. By observing it, and we see its tactics, we see through everything it presents at this point, and well, why is it doing all of that? It's doing all that because reality works the way I've described it up through the first 20 minutes of this presentation, in my opinion. I'll look to your comments. Maybe there's a major component you think I'm getting wrong. Some of you now may want to remind me that this group or this thing or whatever we're dealing with here in a certain type of minion is doing it for energy harvesting or loosh. Whatever their specific reason is that fuels them, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't change the premise of what I'm just saying. Per the rules of the game here, for them to get the energy they need or want, it seems that they need to operate behind a trick. Or they don't come up to anybody and just tap them on and say, hey, can I get some energy? I can't do it on my own here. And, sometimes we just joke and say, why don't they just ask? Well, they just ask for what they need. It's just the rules of the game here. They can get what they need. There's some kind of weird Jupiter ascending energy, loosh or whatever, by operating through a trick and getting generative beings that produce the energy to fall for the trick. It doesn't change anything. Of course, they're out to extract energy. I said the first part, the world isn't very real in terms of the amount of conspiracy, that thousands of things that lay down breadcrumbs. What do those breadcrumbs do if you chase them? In some way, provide energy to the not-nilk. It's all related. I mean, that is absolutely part of it. But it seems that this dark thing here, whatever its aims or goals are, it has to operate inside of these rules, like operating typically behind a trick, not being able to do things to society and culture on its own without getting the buy-in of real people first. It's floating the blurry image. Then real people make that blurry image into 4K or 8K by floating the blurry vague notion, and the real people make that a permanent part of reality. Like when Bruce got that award that I showed in the Free Voice, the Courage Award. Remember Bruce? He has a new name. Oh, that's right. His name, Bruce, is now referred to as Caitlin. Okay, that was the start of floating a blurry image that eventually would become a permanent part of reality. And we tend to say in this community, it's incredible what they are able to do. It's incredible how they impose that, certain lifestyle choices, or they impose that into reality. They can't do it directly. They need buy-in. And the first little baited hook of the buy-in was the Bruce Jenner presentation. Guys, I need to wrap this up. I'd like to go longer, but the electricity went out for a few seconds. Everything reset. The internet has not come back. It's been a long time. I'm going to have to drive out to Panera Bread or McDonald's or something to upload this, and there's a storm coming, some sort of snowstorm or something. I don't know. So I've got to wrap this up, and sorry about that. There's another 15 or 20 minutes. There's some things on my notes here, but the most important point of this is the notion, first off, that no real world could do this, that seeing the way it operates. This is a joke. I mean, this is really this reality. Once you see through it, it gives itself away. And the most important point is when you see it, it really is, I'm going to say, the greatest news of all time. As it becomes less real, you become more real. We don't need to really get any more evidence. We kind of know who we are. And I mean, there should be no fear of death whatsoever. A little bit, if you believe that if the Christians are right, there could be a punishment. I mean, but there's no fear of death like non-existence, and that is ridiculous. It's just the reality in the S.L. Dark gives away the fact that you're an immortal being that's much more than this life. I mean, in terms, again, the only thing that we have to argue about is not if existence continues, but if you pick the wrong religion, are you going to be punished and all that. But I mean, the scariest notion to most people is non-existence or the atheist position. And the way the reality works, there's just no possible chance the atheist position is correct. It's just we can see through everything at this point. It's an absolute joke. Go through life like it's a video game. Really, something bad happens, like it's like, damn, I'll get him next time. It's not that big of a deal. Nothing here is. Thanks for listening.